What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Malcolm. Malcolm Locks everywhere, and you know the vibes. Today, we are on the Principal Protocol, which is a podcast about all things tech, business, esports, and sometimes politics. And today's guest, we have Mr. Matt Meyer, who is the county executive of Newcastle County and is currently running for the seat of governor here in Delaware. Matt, good morning. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm doing great, Malcolm. Hello to all the viewers out there, all the listeners.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much for giving me a few seconds of your time today. So let's just jump right into it. Matt, let the people know who is Matt Meyer. Talk to the people and let them know who you are and why you're in this particular position right now.
Matt Meyer is an esports wannabe. He he
Oh,
he closes his eyes at night and says, maybe one day I'll be Nudie or Malcolm Coley, and I'll be hitting it big in the esports world. I'll be out in Vegas playing games, making the big money. But no, jokes aside, I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate
absolutely.
you doing this, and I appreciate everything you do for the kids in our community. I talk about how we as a state and as a community need to not look back at what has been, but look at the future and try to build a world where we can be successful, or communities and families and individuals can be successful into the future. And you're doing that. You're not
Thank you.
talking it, you're doing it. And I realize
Thank
that.
you.
So
Thank
I'm
you.
a Delaware kid. I grew up outside Wilmington, and I moved into Wilmington, went to Brandywine School District schools, ended up in Harlan for middle school. I know it's an elementary school now, but back
Yes,
then
elementary school. Yep.
I went to Harlan Middle. Our rivals were PS. Eventually went on to high school at Friends, and then off to college through a number of. They ended up in law school. Worked in New York for a while, and then had an opportunity to go to Iraq, where I served as a diplomat. I was embedded with the U.S. Army for a year in Iraq. Spent some time in Kenya growing a business, a sandal making company in one of the poorest neighborhoods in Kenya that we grew to a 30-person company. Eventually came home and started teaching on the east side of Wilmington at a school called Prestige Academy. And a couple things shocked me once I came back home. One was that this ethos of sort of taking care of everyone that I saw when I was embedded with 10,000 American soldiers on an army base in Mosul, Iraq, in the middle of a war, didn't seem to apply when I was teaching middle school math on the east side of Wilmington. It was
Mhm.
just kind of like, oh, that's your problem. You have this issue getting food or getting shelter or getting mental health or substance use assistance or domestic violence issues. That's your problem.
Mhm.
Whereas when I was on the other side of the world in Iraq, we all, as Americans, would make sure we took care of each other, no matter where you came from, no matter what your perspective was. And the second thing is, when I was in Iraq, that was like a $2 trillion operation. We
Mhm.
had all these resources to fight what I think was kind of a ridiculous and useless war.
Mhm.
But here I was trying to teach in one of the richest countries in the history of the world, and we were lacking for basic resources. Teachers often would have to pay for their own photocopies because the
Mhm.
machine was broken or whatever. I didn't think that was right. So that's one of the things that inspired me to run for office. In 2016, 8 years ago, about this time of year, I decided to run for something called county executive. I'd never run for office except for like in 11th grade student council. 11th grade, 11th grade student council. Like I got to be honest, Malcolm, I wasn't the most popular kid. And I had this idea of running student government better. And everyone's like, you got no shot, kid. And I ran anyway, and I won. And
Mhm.
so when I started running for county executive, people are like, you're running against a 12-year, someone who'd been in office for 12 years. Nobody knew who I was. Everybody knew who he was. But we put together a team. We knew what we were about. We were value based. We had a vision for how we could run the county better. We knocked on nearly 10,000 doors, and we were
Whew.
victorious. So now I'm in my second term as county executive. I'm the first chief executive in Newcastle County to be reelected since a man named Chris Coons held
Mhm.
this position 15 years ago, of course, now a U.S. Senator.
Mhm.
And now we want to take the same kind of outsider's attitude, the same idea that government can be nimble. We can move quickly. This is Delaware. We can win the future working with Malcolm and a lot of your peers to build the companies of tomorrow, to be inclusive in how we look at governing and really make a Delaware that's unlike anything we've seen in the past.
I thank you for that, and I want to go back to you mentioned about being nimble, right? How has that shaped your terms in being the county executive, right? Like I know you've initiated a lot of movements in Newcastle County. You know, I've seen it with my own personal eyes. So just talk about your mindset of being nimble. How has that helped you to do some of the things that you've been able to do as county executive?
So it's interesting, Malcolm, with your experience, you know that when you start whatever venture you're working on, if you just do what everybody else does, you're not going to last very long,
Right.
right? What you do, and I know because you try to convince me, hey, I need money for this, I need money for that. You try to convince me that you understand the world, you understand the future, you understand our community, you understand what people need better than a lot of other people, and therefore you know how to make investments, strategic investments that are going to be good for the community. It's very interesting to me that very often in government, the impulse is to do the exact opposite. People have been in government for a long time. They often really want just the status quo. They want things to keep happening the same way. There's very little incentive to change things. If you change things, people are going to come out and they're going to be mad or they're going to be happy. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot easier just to maintain the status quo. But I think, I'm not a status quo guy. I came in and I ran for office because I felt like things in Delaware weren't quite right. We're not getting, for a small state that's highly educated, for a place where we can all talk to each other, we're not getting the health outcomes we deserve. Our education system leaves a lot to be desired. Our
Oh
educational
yes.
equity is embarrassing. Let's
Oh
be honest.
yes.
If you look at how black and brown kids are getting educated in this state, in this
Mhm,
county, and in the city of
mhm.
Wilmington, it's embarrassing
It
compared to
is.
what it should be in a 21st century society. That means if we want different outcomes, we got to change things. We got to bring a little of the Malcolm Coley, Nudie mindset to how we govern and be small and nimble. The good news is we're not California, we're not Pennsylvania, we're not New York. Those are huge governments, multi-billion dollar, tens, hundreds of billions of dollars. And it's very hard to get the ship to move in a new direction. In Delaware, we can do that, right? We can sit down with every school principal in the state of Delaware in
We
a
can.
room and say we're going to, maybe in an auditorium, and say we're going to do things differently, and this is how we're going to do it differently. We can message to them, and so we have strategic advantages. We got to make sure as a state we're taking advantage of that.
And I'm glad that you're saying a lot of stuff that you're saying right now. And I'm gonna I have a list of questions, but we're gonna go ahead and jump around. In your eyes, Matt, when you're talking about education, and I know you're running for the seat of governor, right? How do you feel as though with your progressive mindset, right? How do you feel as though as governor you will affect education here in the state of Delaware?
So there are a few things. First of all, our the the way in which it gets very complicated very fast. Schools in Delaware are basically run by two governing entities. One is the school board, which has primary control. Go and vote in your school board elections. Vote
Please go vote. Please go
in your
vote.
school district referendum. But a lot of the funding also comes from the state government. The formula the state government uses to give money to schools, right? So those are hard decisions, right? We get a pot of money, say $1 billion with a B, to give out to schools across the state. How should we give them out to the schools?
Mm.
How should we give them out to the schools? Should we give it out equally? So if you have, we're going to say each student is, say, $12,000. So we're going to give, no matter what student, we're going to give 12,000. Well, wait a second. What if the student doesn't speak English? What if they got
Mm.
here? That's going to cost extra to
Mm-hmm.
educate them, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if the student comes from a home where they never eat breakfast or didn't eat dinner the night before? Should they get extra resources? The formula in the state of Delaware that was designed to distribute money to schools, you know when that formula was created?
Oh, when was it? Back in like the 60s or something, right? Further back.
40s, 1940s. It's 80 years old, right?
Mm.
What were the value systems in the 1940s,
Completely different.
right?
Completely different.
Who were the people designing that formula in the 1940s? And then you look at the outcomes of our educational system today, and then maybe it starts to make sense a little bit. Now, that's not to denigrate anybody working in the system. We have an educational system where there are a lot of really good, hardworking people, right? I
Agreed.
saw it myself.
Agreed.
When I taught at Prestige, since I taught there, 3 of the teachers I taught with have won Teacher of the Year, right? In other schools they've gone on to, right? Good teachers, working hard, smart, right? Often, to be frank, terribly underpaid, but that the leadership is not there to really address the system and move the system in a way that's going to get the kind of educational outcomes that Delawareans deserve. So we're going to start by looking at the formula by which we distribute money, and we're also going to look at the total pot of money. A report just came out a couple weeks ago, the AIR report, if you want to look it up, that talks about how underfunded the Delaware educational system is, and the consequence of that is that the poor, in particular, people growing up, being born into poverty, lose educational opportunity. And that means social mobility. That means when people are out there creating million and billion dollar companies, the people that got the quality education from the Delaware education system are getting ahead. And those aren't, by and large, black and brown kids. Those aren't, by and large, kids born into poverty. And we need to change that.
100%. And, looking at a lot of these, just a lot of education systems here throughout the state of Delaware, if I'm not mistaken, we're like somewhere at the bottom, bottom. Is there any educational systems that you've seen that are successful that you think that you might want to mimic moving forward if you were elected governor?
I don't look at a whole state. I look at specific programs. Mississippi, right? Believe it or not, Mississippi was known 10 years ago to be the worst, have the worst reading scores, the least equal. They put in place some really impressive, innovating reading programs. I believe that reading education, particularly in poor communities, reading education needs to start before kindergarten. Okay, my teaching experience is I joined a program called Teach for America. What Teach for America does is they say, okay, you agree to teach, we're going to place you in any school in America, right? Any school in America that needs a teacher, we're going to place you there. I got placed in a fourth grade classroom in the Anacostia section of Washington, D.C. I was so disappointed. I wanted to be a high school teacher. I'm like a math, computer science guy. I wanted to be teaching high-end algorithms. I wanted to be doing the kind of stuff Malcolm and Nudie are doing. And I got placed in fourth grade. Like, what am I going to do in fourth grade? It was very interesting. After a week or two teaching fourth grade, I said, these students are too old. Like, they're too old. It's very hard with the baggage they came in with. And many of them were so far behind in fourth grade with their reading skills. It was very, very challenging. It would need such a surge of resources for them to catch up. And I started to learn, wait a second, kindergarten, first grade is when it was at. I did a little bit of teaching kindergarten, first grade, and found, you got to even start earlier. I want to find places where kids, particularly kids in poverty, are starting to slip. And that's often the age of 1, 2, 3. Make sure kids are surrounded by books. Make sure we look at programs like Harlem Children's Zone, which is known to be among the most expensive programs. Costs, I don't know, upwards of $15,000, $20,000 for kids in their infancy. But what they do is they surround kids with knowledge, with peaceful environments, 12, 14 hours a day, so that by the time they get to kindergarten, they're so far ahead of the game, they're prepared to be successful.
I'm glad that you actually spoke of that particular place, because I know about it very well. I've done some studies on the Harlem Children's Zone. So thank you for that. So let's kind of pivot a little bit, right? In terms of, economic growth here in Delaware, we've had an interesting few years. We had the pandemic that you weathered through, right? And now we're kind of moving into like a post-pandemic economic, whether it be a downturn, upturn. I'm looking more of it as a downturn at the moment. What are some of your plans in terms, if you were elected governor, if you wanted to really boost economic growth here in Delaware, what are some of the things that you would want to implement in order to boost that economic growth?
So let's say you're a 9th, 10th grader now. And when people ask you, what do you want to do when you grow up? You say you want to be a doctor, right? You say you want to be a doctor.
There's no medical schools in Delaware.
And so you get top grades in high school. You go to UD. You get top grades at UD. You are determined to be a doctor. That's a great thing for our community. We have a tremendous shortage of healthcare professionals, doctors, nurses, med techs. We need you to stay in Delaware. When you finish college, as you said, Malcolm, in Delaware, and you want to go to med school, you have to leave Delaware.
Yes, you
Once you
do.
leave Delaware, statistics show
You
there's
ain't
a
coming back.
chance you'll come back, but there's a much better chance you're not going to come back. So we need to develop the systems here in all industries so that you can grow up here, you can thrive here. You don't feel like you have to leave the state to get educated in your field or to be the best in your field. So that's generally. More specifically, we're going to look at investing heavily in keeping talent here and in growing companies here. Our state in recent years has spent $20 million through the Delaware Prosperity Partnership and additional millions of dollars through other infrastructure funds to incentivize companies from outside of Delaware to come to Delaware. I think we need to be spending something on that level to make sure that companies are incentivized to start in Delaware. Not just, it's very hard once a company has, 100, 200, 500, 5,000 employees. It's very hard to bring them here. It's highly competitive. I know as your county executive, companies come and what they do is they shop counties and states off each other. Hey, you give me $1 million. I've had employers say this to me. You're giving me $1 million. Maryland's giving me $2 million.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to Maryland unless you can give me more money. Amazon said it to me, and I said, you know what, guys? If you don't want to come here and pay taxes for our police, for our paramedics, 911, libraries, parks, schools, go to Maryland. I don't go there and don't pay taxes.
And they ended up going to New York, right?
Well, for the HQ2 project, they ended up choosing New York and DC. This is for smaller things. Most of the time, can I tell you a secret, Malcolm? Not all the time, but most of the time when you say that, you know what they choose to do? They choose to come to Delaware because they're actually not just, they're bluffing. It's not always true. I got to be careful. But very often what they're doing is they've already decided to go to Delaware and they say, oh, as long as we're going to Delaware, we might as well try and get a tax break. Right. And then we say, no, they still come to Delaware because the dynamics of where they need to be in terms of delivery, the dynamics of where they need to be in terms of employment. And it's not just Amazon, it's Dot Foods and others. So I want to really work on redirecting a lot of those resources into starting and growing Delaware companies.
So now, and I can you take that a step further, right? I know that there's a lot of conversations around kids understanding trades earlier in their high school career or even in a middle school setting, right? When you talk about electricians and plumbers and carpenters, and even higher level trades, what is your answer to kind of address some of those issues? Is it more Votex? Is it different type of trade schools? Like, I just know that trades are just dwindling as time goes along. So do you have an answer to that, or what are your opinions on that?
You know what's interesting, Malcolm, is that the Votex system, right? Votech is where we turn instantly. We talk about welding, you talk about roofing, a lot of the skills you're talking about. Huge shortages right now, huge opportunities. You come work 2-3 years, you're going to be making $100,000 or more, right? If you're willing to work, put your head down, work hard, learn a trade. What's interesting is if you go to William Penn, if you go to McCain, if you go to Dickinson, a lot of schools I know in Newcastle County, also Indian River, some of the schools down south, Capital School District, you find a lot of trades in those schools too. So it's like and you find a lot of kids going to Hodson and St. George's and Del Castle and Howard who are going to college, right? Wait a second. I thought Votech was learn a trade and you're not intending to be college bound, but they're sort of emerging. So we're going to look at that and make sure that whether you go to a Votech or a traditional public school, we're providing you the highest quality program to move into a trade. We're also going to look hard at Del Tech. I know Del Tech's been doing a really good job collaborating with industry, making sure we're serving industry's needs. But we're also going to do a lot with software. I think you know about our partnership that we did at the county with Code Differently, a program called 1,000 Kids.
1,000 Kids Code.
I think a lot of things that you're working on, Malcolm, a lot of things, Nudie, a lot of things, Code Differently, JP Morgan, a lot of their technology needs. If you look at what the needs are for software, for networking, IT support, we're not teaching them in our schools.
Right.
Right. something like 4% of Delaware high school students get software development skills now.
Mm-hmm.
4%. Well, wait a second. I was teaching kids how to like learn all sorts of formulas, quadratic formula, the slope of a line, things that I can pretty much assure you 98% of those kids would never use again in their life. Well, I'm not saying we don't teach that, but we got to make sure to teach things that we know kids could really use. When we started this program called 1,000 Kids Coding at the county, just to take our summer youth employment program, which teaches kids to mow the grass in the parks, come into an office, be respectful. And we took that time and those students and took hundreds of them each year and taught them to program computers. And it's extraordinarily successful. JP Morgan has hired kids out of our program. Vanguard has announced they're hiring kids out of, because there's a direct need. They're hiring kids right out of high school. So we're going to look at how we match the economic need to our schools and look more broadly at our curriculum in the schools. And how do we transition a curriculum that, like our funding system, was developed back in the 1940s, 50s, 60s? How do we transition that curriculum to the needs of the 21st century? Let me just say one more other quick thing that not a lot of people are talking about, but that we are entering an AI world, right?
Oh, I was about to get to that.
What you and I have seen is an information revolution, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where if I ask you, what did you learn in school here? My guess is not much of it prepared you for sort of World Wide Web days where all information is at your fingertips. Knowledge, the way it was presented to me in school, was that you sit down, you close your mouth, the teacher tells you what to do, and you do it, right? But that's not the
We
world
don't,
we live
yeah,
in.
we don't live in that world anymore.
We don't live in that world anymore. We got to make sure our education system reflects that. And we got to make sure it reflects both some of the moral and ethical and public safety challenges of
Agreed.
artificial intelligence, and also some of the technological challenges. If someone in Delaware can understand how to program a system to do generative AI, to make a car drive, to make all sorts of things, to do the work of an administrator or something. If we can teach Delaware kids to do that, we are preparing them for success. But very few schools around the country or the world are doing that right now. I think we can do it here in Delaware.
I'm glad that you're talking about that, because that's 100. That's my wheelhouse. So just keeping on that mindset around technology. And I know we don't have as much time as I would like to have. What do you see outside of just AI, right? Just technology as a whole. If you become governor, how would you really want to implement technology initiatives across the state? Because we have huge populations in Kent that's really focused on manufacturing, and then Sussex is just a whole nother beast in and of itself, right? How do you see just the implementation of, maybe it could be an AI, or maybe it could be a certain level of robotics, or just training in technology as a whole? How do you see that really affecting Delaware moving forward into 2024?
So in the first place, I believe in leading by example. If you
Okay.
want to know what a Meyer administration in Delaware is going to look like in terms of technology and governance, you should study Estonia. Estonia is a small country, former Soviet republic, that had the advantage about 25 years ago of being created as a country. It had split off from the Soviet Union, and they were basically creating a country. Unlike if you create a country in the 21st century, would you have everyone get a piece of plastic that they put in their wallet to prove that they're licensed to drive, right? Would you do that? No, probably not. You just put something on here so they can show to say, hey, I can drive. Too many of our government systems in Delaware, in the United States, are saddled by legacy systems. I'm not
Agreed.
saying we're going to get rid of paper. I'm saying our primary way of engaging with citizens, the goal will be for us to primarily engage with citizens through technology, to make it seamless, to make it more efficient. Let me give you an example. In Newcastle County, the overwhelming majority of taxpayers, when I came in, paid their property taxes by check. Right? They paid by check. It either went through escrow or they paid by check. The word I was told by our finance department is we don't want people to pay by credit card because credit card costs money, right? There's a 3%, 4% charge for every credit card that the merchant charges, the banks charges. And a check is free. There's no charge. The problem is there actually is a charge because every check, someone's got to open the envelope, or a machine has to open the envelope. Someone's got to look at the check, analyze the check. Someone's got to decide how it gets deposited. Someone's got to read if some of the lettering's off, stuff like that. So every time somebody writes us a check, there's actually a cost. We actually also have to go get it from the PO box. We pay a vendor to do that. So what we said is, how do we get people to pay by Apple Pay or Venmo, right? And so we've done that. We've reduced the number of checks that people are sending property taxes by tens of thousands of dollars, simply by saying, how do we run a 21st century government so it's all here? We're going to work on an app. It might be a single app or 2 or 3 apps for state government. So if you think all the ways that you interact with government, all the way you pay taxes and fees, we're going to try to make it seamless, easy, and efficient. That's going to extend to how we look at our economic development. I think too often our economic development is backward looking, right? It's saying what has been happening. It was interesting. I was at Mount Zion AME Church on this past Sunday, and the pastor there, Reverend Crawford, it was a great sermon. She started by saying, "What is the present? Like the present is what's happening right now. Well,
Right now.
When I say words to you, right? And when you're listening to my words, do you realize that by the time you hear my words, they're actually in the past, right? They're actually in the past. So the way we perceive everything now is actually like past tense. What we need to do, what forward-looking leadership is, for me to sit down with Malcolm, Nudie, other people who have their eyes on our future and say, where are we going? In 5 years, in 10 years, where is our economy going to be? And how do we plant the seeds to be successful in the future? You know, Silicon Valley did that. The Silicon Valley was not that different than Delaware. It was suburban San Francisco, just the way we're suburban Philadelphia. There were a couple of guys who started tinkering in a garage, I think in Palo Alto or Mountain View, and that became Hewlett Packard, Mr. Hewlett and Mr. Packard, and that became the basis of a technological revolution.
That was almost the same thing with Apple. Almost the same exact thing with Apple too.
That's right. And so that can be here too. So we're going to work hard to think it's not just in software. It's obviously not just in building computers and devices.
It goes so much further.
In e-gaming. It can be in welding, some new technology in welding. But we're going to look at some industries, say, where is it going? And how do we make strategic investments to win?
It's interesting that you mentioned Silicon Valley. I feel as though, and you could let me know if I'm pretty sure you would agree, right? Because of Delaware's positioning in terms of our access to highways, in terms of our access to a large body of water, right? I personally feel as though, especially when you're talking about artificial intelligence and all the water that you need in order to power the back end, that's another conversation, right? I feel as though that Delaware is positioned to be what I call the Silicon Valley East of sorts, right? So it's interesting that you mentioned, Silicon Valley and Hewlett Packard, because I feel as though Delaware is positioned to be the next technology hub of the nation. But I don't know if Delaware is seeing that in that way. What are your thoughts around Delaware being the next Silicon Valley?
Well, I think we need our own identity. I agree. When I go to economic development conferences, it sounds like everyone's trying to be the next Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
I kind of like the Chilicon Valley. You don't know what the Chilicon Valley is. I'm serious.
I've never heard of that.
Chilicon Valley, you should look it up. Santiago, Chile, right? Capital city of a country down in South America. I think it was about 20 years ago. They decided that they have beautiful beachfront there, and they wanted to attract some of the technology entrepreneurs of tomorrow. So they put together a fund. I think it was $5-10 million. And they said, let's build a dream environment for the entrepreneurs of tomorrow. What do entrepreneurs want? You're starting a company. Guy like Malcolm starting a company. What does he want? Well, he needs some basic funding. So you need some to burn cash for a couple of years so it doesn't have to run around worrying about funding his company all the time. He wants, probably access to talent, high-end engineers.
Mm-hmm.
He wants access to markets so that once you have a product, you can market test it really quickly. And you want access to capital so you can grow. And they did all those things. They said, let's say $10 million. And they ran a competition to get the best entrepreneurs in the world. They got 5, 10, 15 entrepreneurs to move to Chile, mostly from the United States, but I think from a variety of countries. They got a visa where they could freely come and go outside the country. It was a great environment. And next thing you know, there were 10 companies, and then 4 or 5 venture capital firms wanted to be there, and then 10 other companies wanted to be, and it spurred a whole industry. So they didn't do it the Silicon Valley way, where sort of it was a couple guys in the garage. They did it in their own way. I think that's the kind of thing we need to do when we need to look at an industry. Maybe it's chemicals, maybe it's gaming, right? Maybe it's some sort of an app, educational apps. And we say, okay, we have the seeds here of something really special. Maybe it's healthcare, right? When you add a medical school, and we're going to invest in it to create an environment where the innovative technologies are being developed here, and the entrepreneurs who want to develop that technology, we're presenting them with a can't say no proposition.
Okay. Okay. I like the thought process around that, man. I like it a lot. Now with that being said, I kind of want to shift from technology to, being transparent in government, right? I know when we here in Delaware, government is interested in terms of reaching across the aisle in order to get things done. What is your goal in terms of really reaching across the aisle legislatively to really get things done?
Look, I think that there's a danger that there's sort of this the Republican Democrat thing is really hamstringing the country right now and preventing us from getting basic things done in Washington. Delaware, I like to say we're a state, but we're also kind of just a few villages, right? Of people who mostly all know each other, and we can find a way to get along. So there's this sort of national thing, right? The MSNBC, Fox News, Newsmax
They
thing,
push out a narrative.
and then there's Delaware's thing, where we have a history of being able to get along and get things done. And so my pledge is to work across the aisle. Part of it is saying, wait a second, if a Republican member of the House proposes something, we can't dismiss it just because it's a Republican supporting it. If we ask our Republican friends to say, you shouldn't dismiss something just because a Democrat supports it. Now, having said that, there are some things that I fundamentally believe. I believe in very strong. There are things that are being said by Republicans nationally and some in Delaware too that I think are totally inappropriate in a 21st century society. Things about equity, things about trying to rewrite our history, things about trying to divide a society that I think is already too divided. I have very little tolerance for that. But when it comes to ideas to actually solve problems, I think most of them are bipartisan. I have full commitment to work together. And I'll tell you, I believe I have at the county level. One of my closest allies in county council is Janet Kilpatrick, who is the only Republican on county council.
Yes, she is.
My guess is if we sit down and talk, Janet Kilpatrick and I disagree on a whole lot of things. But we find a way to get things done because we understand that when we do that, that serves her constituents and it serves my constituents as well.
I like that. Well, I hope to see it. I'm gonna get 2 more questions out of you before I get my one last question. Delaware housing is a crazy issue, especially when you talk about land use, not just here in Newcastle County, but Kent, Sussex. How do you feel as though you would address that if elected governor? Because I know just housing is just a critical issue nationally, but here in Delaware it's even more critical just because of the use of land throughout the state. What are some of your answers potentially to answer that crisis that we're having?
The situation in Newcastle County is bad, really bad, worse than it's been in years.
Mm,
and the situation in Sussex is a lot worse,
mm,
in my view. Um, I, a couple things. First, it's a problem of money and public subsidy, making sure there's public resources available so that no Delawarean, certainly no working Delawarean, goes without affordable shelter. I mean, you have Delawareans spending half of their take home, 60% of their monthly take home, just to get decent housing. You think of single parent families or single breadwinner, single person working with children. It's really, really challenging. We got to make sure the subsidy is there to support families like that through housing challenges. The second thing, as you referenced, is really looking hard at land use rules. We've been talking with some affordable housing developers. You know, if you think of the traditional Habitat for Humanity house, it's a two-story house, right, on a single lot.
mhm,
What if that's often constructed from the ground up or totally gut rehabbed? What if we put a third floor apartment on there? So instead of having one housing unit, you have two housing units. And
mhm,
instead of having a family that's going to struggle to pay the rent or pay their mortgage each month, you have a family that not only can pay the mortgage each month, but can have a renter on the third floor. So they have a source of revenue, a second source of revenue, smarter land use. You do that right there, you can potentially double the impact of nonprofit
mm,
housing developers. We've also in Newcastle County recently proposed a change in our rules for accessory dwelling units, which is
mm,
traditionally uh, suburban neighborhoods have really revolted against uh, allowing additional units in the home. Think of an aging parent or grandparent, providing them sort of a private apartment within the home where they could operate, similar to what I'm saying with habitat homes, where you just are able to add an extension to your home that doubles the number of housing units. So instead of having, one family live in a home, you can have one family and then a smaller dwelling unit right beside it. We got to look at what they call a dangerous word in land use and in politics, and that's density.
mm,
I'm not saying everywhere have density, but what we did through our comprehensive planning process in Newcastle County is we said in certain targeted areas, right? In certain areas, we're going to look for a higher density housing, and hopefully the market can make some determination of here we're going to be able to build affordable housing. We're going to be able to build starter homes. We're going to be able to build second and third homes, and we're going to be able to build for the higher end of the market too, so that there's a sufficient supply for all ends of the market. Listen, what they're saying politically now is that Bidenomics, right? All the economic indicators, not all, many of the economic indicators are good, right? Unemployment is at historic low levels. Interest rates are coming down. The inflation problems that we had a year or two ago really have started to dissipate. But the problem is it's hard to convince people of that when they can't afford a home, when they can't
mm,
afford to buy, when they
mm,
can't afford to rent, when the costs are skyrocketing.
mm.
That's a basic supply demand problem. We got to make sure we do everything we can to increase the supply of homes across our state so that prices come down and housing is affordable.
That's going to be a difficult task. I'm glad I don't have to make those decisions.
Yeah.
That's a
You
real
do it,
difficult
you do it
task.
one project at a time and one
Yeah,
law at a time.
yeah, yeah.
So,
Um, one last thing before I ask my main question. Earlier last year, coming off of COVID, we seen a lot of. I think it was about 60,000 folks in Delaware lost access to healthcare, right? What are some of the things that you would like to implement in terms of just, overall generic quality of life healthcare? How do you see, there we have several different hospital systems. We have we have BB in Sussex, we have Bay Health in Kent, we have Christiana up here. How do you see more of a unification of healthcare, and how does that, overall help the quality of healthcare here in Delaware?
yeah, and don't forget Tidal Health
Oh yeah,
down
Title
in
Health. Yep.
Sussex and the
Mhm.
Moors and
No
St.
more.
Francis as well up here, and probably a few others. I'm forgetting. Listen, my, my wife, I don't know if you know this, my wife is the vice chair of emergency medicine at Christiana Care. She's an emergency room doctor. I hear every day heart wrenching stories. She does shift work. She was there the day before yesterday. she did a shift. Heart-wrenching stories of Delawareans, good Delawareans who are underserved by our healthcare system. I also hear stories of tremendously impressive workers. I mean, the doctors, the nurses, the med techs who we attract to our state to serve the population is really impressive, especially given that we don't have a medical school. So there's a lot of good people working very hard and working very smart to serve Delawareans' health. But as you said, the outcomes just aren't there. There are too many Delawareans who go to the emergency room to get primary care. And so when you go to the emergency room, your wait might be 12, 18, 24 hours. Ridiculous, right? There are too many Delawareans who need to wait 6, 8 months to see a specialist, or months to get something like an MRI that should be basic in a 21st century society. Similar to what I said with housing, we got to work on supply. We got to make sure that there is sufficient supply in our system to meet the demand. The healthcare demand is spiking in part because of our population, the baby boomers, right? You have an aging population that's really putting incredible stresses on our population. And as you know, Malcolm, when there's stresses in our education system, in our housing system, in our healthcare system, who are the first people left behind? People living in poverty. That's one reason we made what some at the time called a crazy decision to invest a significant amount of taxpayer money to buy the largest hotel, one of the largest hotels in Delaware, and turn it into the Hope Center, a comprehensive facility that includes healthcare. You know, Christiana Care has a facility on the top floor there. You know that normally homeless and indigent populations for primary care, they go to the emergency room. That's where they go if they're coughing too much or doing things that you or I would go to our primary care doctor for. We've set it up so that all they have to do is take the elevator to the top floor and they're seeing a primary care doctor. We need to set up systems so that's not just true for our most vulnerable at the Hope Center, but that's true for all Delawareans. We got to make sure we channel people into the primary care system, and we have to work to attract and retain more primary care physicians, primary care nurses and support staff, and create the incentives for private groups to grow here so that there is the supply of doctors that's needed. It's not an easy problem. There are a lot of communities in a lot of states around the country tackling it or trying to tackle it and not having much success. I can tell you we're going to be on the front lines of doing innovative things to address the health needs, particularly of the poorest and most vulnerable Delawareans.
I like to hear it. I like to hear it. Okay. The last question. So the name of the podcast is the Principal Protocol. So Matt, what are your 3 principal protocols of life?
My 3 principal protocols of life. The first is you got to pause and take time for loved ones. Not many people know this, Malcolm. I don't think you know it, but I guess it was a year and a half ago in February of 2022. I have a 12-year-old nephew who is very athletic, and his father, my brother, is not very athletic. And my mom for years was saying I had to take Noah skiing. And so on President's Day 2022, I took Noah skiing. But the problem, we went up to the Poconos and it was too hot. It was like 60 degrees, climate change and everything. And it was terrible skiing. And a few days later, it got really cold. We went with a whole group of people. And Noah called me and he said, let's go skiing again. My dad doesn't want to go. And so that weekend, I had a super busy weekend. I'm county executive. They had me running around to this and that. I, for some reason, decided to kind of cancel everything and just go skiing with Noah. And the two of us went skiing. I tricked him into going down a Black Diamond, which is the steepest of steep hills. I almost fell down. I did fall down myself. I was trying to show off, and I took some great video and stuff. 2 weeks later, Noah came down with something in his stomach, and 48 hours later, he was gone from this earth. And I think about that every single day, that you never know when this beautiful time on this planet with your loved ones will end. And so this is obviously a really important time for me. I'm running for governor. right? I think we have a vision for the state. We're gaining traction. Our polling looks great. It's exciting, but it's really important for me, and I hope it's important for you
Absolutely.
to press pause and take those days when you cancel everything and just sit with loved ones and understand that whatever you cherish on this earth, it is not forever, and cherish it while it's here. So that's protocol number one. I don't know. That's sort of 1, 2, and 3 for me these days. A lesson I learned from my beautiful nephew. I guess something else that I learned from is just have fun. This is a serious business I'm in. We're talking about people's resources, people's livelihoods. When my wife, I talk about her work as an emergency room doctor. A lot of it's life and death. But you got to be able to kick back, relax, have fun. I would not suggest watching Eagles games. That's traditionally what I do with my father. It's been a rough few weeks, few months.
I'm so glad they lost. I'm a diehard Cowboys fan, so I'm so glad they lost.
Oh, yeah, how the
We
Cowboys do.
lost. Yes,
How the
we
Cowboys.
lost in tremendous
The
form this
Cowboys
weekend.
season ended before the Eagles season did.
Yes, it did.
And shout out to Darnell Savage, who picked six Dak Prescott, the pride of Seaford, Delaware, pick six on Dak. But so those are the two things I'll leave you with. One is press pause and spend time with loved ones, and the other is kind of work really hard, take your work seriously, but make sure you enjoy life as well. Take time to enjoy. Don't hurt yourself, but have fun, especially on this, which is a snow day for most of Delaware.
Yeah, Matt, thank you so much for giving me some time and joining me on the Principal Protocol. It was a good time, and good luck, because this is the year we're going to find out if you become governor or not.
Thanks so much, Malcolm. It's not luck, it's skill.
Oh, I like that. I
I need
like
your
that. I
help.
like that. So this is the Principal Protocol, and this is your guy, Malcolm. Malcolm Locks everywhere. This will be available on all platforms. So thank you guys for tuning in. Talk to you guys soon.